All right. Hey, how y'all doing? Here we are back again, back from my bunker. Here's my loyal hound here. Come here. Come here. Say hello. Sit. 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 Hey. Sit. Uh, can you see? Well, here. Wait. There you go. There she is. All right. Go lay down. Let me get to work. Okay. So we're gonna start talking about medical anthropology today. Probably very appropriate since we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're hearing a lot about what doctors and nurses are doing these days. So I always start, every PowerPoint with a little kind of mood setting slide here. So I'll just talk about some of the things that are on this slide for a minute. All right. Give you an idea of the kinds of things we're going to be talking about throughout this piece here. So first of all, we're going to get you, a more detailed and a little fuller definition of what medical anthropology is. But down here, we have a definition that comes from Ron Barrett, and you're going to be learning a little bit more about Ron Barrett later on. He talks about something very important to medical anthropology. Over here, we have a kind of a medieval depiction of bloodletting. Okay, it's a common medical practice a long time ago. Here we have the beginnings of what we might call scientific medicine in Western society, from which what we're going to call the Western biomedical model is going to emerge. We have here the god. This is the god Asclepius. Oops, I didn't want to do that. This is the god Asclepius, who was I don't know why does it keep doing that? The god Asclepius, who was the Greek god of medicine, son of Apollo, actually the son of Apollo and a mortal. Now, the story behind Asclepius was that this kind of doctors, worked, or maybe the way I should put it was Asclepius kind of mediated the relationship between a doctor and his patient. But the Greeks set up what were maybe we might even consider them very early temples or very early hospitals, which were actually temples, right, where people would go when they were sick to be treated. And you have here something called this is called the caduceus. You've probably seen that before, and it's on the sort of the symbol of medicine, modern medicine, and it's also on that registered nurse patch there. But there's something I want to say about this caduceus. It's a kind of an interesting story because the god of medicine was Asclepius, and Asclepius, I'm going to say it like this, the real symbol of medicine is the staff of Asclepius. Here you see it's a staff with a single snake wrapped around it. And somehow in history there was a mistake made, and the caduceus became the symbol of Western medicine. The caduceus is actually the staff of Hermes. Now there's different stories about why that happened. Why did they make this big blunder? And why are doctors and nurses, especially in North America, walking around with the caduceus on their, signs and stuff and their logos, and not the staff of Asclepius? And one story goes, and I don't know if there's any proof for this. There's some different explanations, but the one that seems to make a lot of sense to me was that back in the 19th century, there was a guy named John Churchill and John Churchill was writing medical books, medical texts, and he was putting this symbol, the caduceus, on his books, and so it became associated with medicine, when in actuality, he was using the caduceus as kind of his trademark for his printing company, so, or his publishing company. So um, that's how things happen in history. That actually Hermes, the messenger of the gods, one of the things that Hermes did was to guide the dead to the afterlife, and so that probably isn't really a. If we knew that, maybe that isn't the kind of symbolism you really want for medicine. But be that as it may, nobody knows about this stuff anyway. So what difference does it make? The caduceus has become the symbol of medicine rather than the staff of Asclepius. And well, that's probably way too much on that. We don't have to worry about that. Not something I'll ever ask you on the test. Don't worry about that. Now we also have here we have, okay, this is here representing something that we're going to call humoral healing. Okay, and this is actually a chart showing the chakras. Keeping your chakras aligned is a part of medical practice. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later on. Maybe another connection to another kind of humoral healing is this guy here. He's an herbalist. So now we're starting to get into traditional, right? Over here we got traditional and folk systems of healing, including here, right? And so what you have here is our old pals, the Kung, doing a healing dance. So that's going to represent what we're going to call communal healing. Okay, and so we got humoral healing over with the herbalist. I don't know why that happens. We got the herbalist, and we got the chakras over here, and we have the communal healing. All that's there to represent folk and indigenous modes of healing. And we're even going to bring up the question of, well, do those folk systems work? And then we have this contrast here. So what you see in this picture is a picture of a skull. This is with a big hole in it. This is Stone Age surgery. So even during the Stone Age, there were people who were actually performing brain surgery. Now, who knows why they did it? Did they do it because they thought they were alleviating, letting evil spirits out or whatever? Who knows? Certainly, this could be a treatment for certain kinds of head trauma. And we know, right, that people survive this because archaeologists find lots of examples of this, and there's signs of healing, right? That the bone starts to heal, and so we know that people live through this. And then you contrast that with this picture here, and there's our depiction of high-tech Western medicine. Okay. And then let's not forget over here, we got mental health. All right, I might as well stay here. I know a lot of you are nurses, and I just put this here because I saw this picture, this t-shirt, and it's my favorite definition of what a nurse is, right? A nurse is the first person you see after saying, "Hold my beer and watch this." I'm waiting for, we can't do it this year, but I'm waiting for somebody to put this on their graduation cap. Excuse me, put this on their graduation cap during graduation. All right. So what do we get into here? Let's start. All right. So we're talking about medical anthropology. I'm going to try to give you a definition of medical anthropology. And one thing we could say is that medical anthropology is a sub-branch of anthropology. including cultural anthropology, that's concerned with the topic of ethnomedicine. Okay, ethnomedicine. Now we know when we put that ethno in front of medicine, we're talking about culture. So cultural medicine, or the connection, right, between culture and medicine. So ethnomedicine is the study of cross-cultural health and healing systems, right? So ethnomedicine is the study of cross-cultural health and healing systems. Every culture has some kind of a healing system. All right. And so the way we can define a health system or a healing system is that it consists of classifications and it consists of perceptions of health problems, different kinds of health problems. How do people within a culture understand and deal with different kinds of health problems? Because we know that sickness is a fact of life, right? Now, besides the creation of labels and the creation of categories of health problems and perceptions of health problems, then we're also going to say here that health systems or healing systems are also characterized by other things, like how do you prevent sickness, right? All cultures are interested in how to prevent sickness, how to diagnose it, or how to heal it, right? And do we accomplish healing through magic, or do we accomplish it through science? And then every health system is also going to have its healers. Might be shamans, might be doctors, might be registered nurses, might be respiratory therapists, right? They're all healers within some kind of a healing system. And we are, right? We are, as human beings, prone to illness. And so everybody, who's in our class, right? Everybody who's in our course is either going to be working, right, within, some of you are going to be working within that health system, right? Or some of you are going to, in fact, all of us eventually are going to turn to it, right? Because we're going to need healing. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So the Western biomedical model, let's talk about that a little bit. And to talk about the Western biomedical model, we've got to go back to our understanding of what ethnomedicine is. Okay. So the term, first of all, I started you off with this term ethnomedicine, and it replaced the term primitive medicine. So it used to be, right? Used to be that in anthropology they referred to medicine, right? And they referred to primitive medicine. So when they were talking about medicine, they meant the Western biomedical model. This is a model, as we're going to see, that's based on science and based on technology. So in other words, there was medicine, and what Westerners had was real medicine, and what everybody else had was primitive, right? Primitive medicine. Okay. Now, there was a feeling eventually, there was a belief eventually that calling what other people did, calling other people's systems of healing, calling them primitive, was ethnocentric. And so eventually we scrapped this whole idea of primitive medicine, and we talk about healing systems in general now. Okay, so medical anthropology was concerned with non-Western health systems. Calling those systems primitive was a bit judgmental and ethnocentric, but now medical anthropology recognizes that the Western biomedical model, right, the the system that we have, which we abbreviate WBM, is just one system in a world of other healing systems. Western biomedicine emphasizes science and technology in the diagnosis and treatment of health problems. Now, I got to move myself out of the way here for a second so you can read this. All right. So as far as medical anthropology is concerned, Western biomedicine, this Western biomedical model, is an ethnomedical system. Just like any other ethnomedical system, every culture has an ethnomedical system. The Western biomedical model is bound to Western cultural values, okay? Just like other ethnomedical systems are bound to other cultural values, right? Okay, and we are going to ask, and we are going to, talk about, well, how effective are all these? Do they work? Well, I'm gonna tip my hand a little bit, I think, here now and say, well, they all work, right? To some extent, they all work to some extent, and for various other reasons. Okay. All right. So, the Western biomedical model. All right. And we're trying to get away from, or anthropology was trying to get away from the ethnocentrism of calling what non-Westerners did primitive medicine. Okay. So where do we go from here? Oh, that's my hip. That's my hip. That's both my hips. Let's have this here to kind of, to me, this symbolizes Western biomedicine technology, because Western biomedicine, man, is a great thing. This is my left hip. That's my hip replacement. And to me, first of all, it's amazing, right, that we have a technology that allows us to see into the body like this. And then we have a technology that allows us to perform this kind of surgery where you think, and this is fairly routine surgery now. And you think that, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, arthritis would have crippled me eventually, right? I would have probably ended up in a wheelchair. Now, this is my right hip here. This is the one, as soon as the pandemic is over, hopefully, they'll be able to replace this one too. And I don't know how many of you know how to read an x-ray, but what this is showing is that I really don't have very much gliding surface left. Not much good cartilage left in here. In fact, very, very little. So basically, it's bone on bone. That's why that has to go. Okay. But again, to me, this represents what Western biomedicine really is. Okay. Very good thing. Western biomedicine is a very good thing. However, we're gonna also talk about how it's not without its flaws, right? It's not without its shortcomings that maybe we need to address. And I think that's one of the points that Miller is making in that article, or in that chapter. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with the issue of defining and classifying health problems. And when we talk about defining and classifying health problems from the point of view of anthropology, one of the big problems is what Miller calls, or what we can even just refer to as emic diversity. Within medical anthropology, there's a problem, and the problem is emic diversity. That means that, and if you remember what emic means, it means things seen from the point of view of cultural insiders. So in other words, there's a lot of diversity out there in the world over how people understand and classify health and health issues, sickness, how they understand sickness. Let's put it that way, okay? How they understand sickness. And to believe that Western biomedical labels, right? To believe that the labels of the Western biomedical model are universally applicable to every culture is naive realism. There it is. It's naive realism, right? It's naive realism to believe that everybody in the world, every culture in the world sees sickness in the same way. So this problem of emic diversity creates problems, right, for anthropology. And the way that anthropology is going to deal with this, so Western biomedical labels for disease often don't correspond to the labels of other cultures. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later, right? How these Western biomedical labels for diseases don't really correspond to labels in other cultures. But the place that we start with ethnomedicine is this, right? That medical anthropologists make a distinction between disease and illness. We call this the disease-illness dichotomy, okay? The disease-illness dichotomy. And so what does the disease-illness dichotomy refer to? Well, first of all, this, right? There's a difference between disease and illness. So let's start over here with disease. What do we mean by, what does ethnomedicine mean by disease? Okay, well, disease refers to biological health problems that are objective, right? Biological health problems that are objective. And they're also universal. So disease refers to the edict, right? To the edict, the etic, right? Qualities of health problems. So you have examples, right? Like infections and so on. If we were looking at COVID-19, so what would we say about COVID-19 as a disease? It is caused by a virus, right? The statement that it's caused by a virus is a objective fact. Okay. Now we go from that, right, to this idea of the objective qualities of a health problem, to illness. So illness is the emic, right? So the disease-illness dichotomy is talking about this relationship between the etic and the emic, all right? So illness now is a culturally specific perception, okay? Culturally specific perceptions and culturally specific experiences of a health problem. It's what the health problem means to the people who experience it within the context of their culture. It is connected to the way that their culture defines what's happening to them. Okay, so in other words, illness is referring to the meaning of diseases to cultural insiders. Okay, the meaning of diseases to cultural insiders, the emic. All right, and both have to be we have to understand both of those. We have to understand both disease and illness. Okay, now I'm going to give you an example of this disease-illness dichotomy, and for that we turn to the guy that I named on the very first slide. Okay, that was Ron Barrett. Okay, Ron Barrett. Ron Barrett wrote an article called Leprosy on the Ganges. Now, the Ganges River is in India. Now, I was going to give you this article, but obviously I can't. And there's no place I can find a link to it anywhere. In fact, there's a few articles that I can't get to you. And so don't worry about them. But I make references to them. I make references to them in this presentation, and I'm going to talk about them. So whatever I say about them, whatever you see on your PowerPoints here is, what all you can know about those articles, unless you can track them down and read them. So if anybody cares to, they can find Leprosy on the Ganges by Ron Barrett, and we have a picture here of a leper colony. Okay, so a leper colony in India, and he talks about the disease-illness dichotomy. Okay, his work illustrates the disease-illness dichotomy. Let me get both of them up here for a second. Move myself out of the way. myself up here. I'll move myself right here. Okay. So the disease illness dichotomy, right? So first of all, it talks about leprosy as a disease. So what are the objective qualities of leprosy? What do we know about it? Well, we know that leprosy is caused. Oh, I gotta get my pen back here. Leprosy is caused by a bacterium. All right. Leprosy is caused by a bacterium. We know that. We also know that it is not highly contagious. Now, while we're doing this, think about the myths, right, that you have ever heard, right, about leprosy, right? That it's a flesh-eating disease, that people's limbs will fall off, that it's highly contagious, that the people that suffer from leprosy need to be isolated, from society. Look at your Bible, right? I mean, look at how people understood leprosy back then, right? But we know that leprosy is caused by a bacterium, and we know that it's not highly contagious. In fact, it isn't very contagious at all, and it is highly curable. Okay, it's highly curable, especially if you catch it early. If you catch leprosy early, it's curable with a course of antibiotics or through a course of antibiotics. All right, so what else? Well, we do associate, right? We do associate leprosy with physical deformities, different kinds of physical deformities. Now, these physical deformities actually are the result of accumulated trauma. So here's what that means, okay? Leprosy is a disease that attacks the nervous system, and so people who get leprosy can't feel as well, right? Their sense of touch and their sensation deteriorates. So because of that, they're constantly hurting themselves, right? They're burning themselves and cutting themselves and so on. And if you think about like where these people live, think about where these people live, right? That all of this secondary trauma that's a result of leprosy is going to lead to things like other kinds of infections, okay? And so that's where the physical deformities come from. They come from this accumulation of trauma, okay? All right, and then we already said that leprosy is curable through a course of antibiotics, especially if it's caught early. So that's what we know. That's the disease. That's the etic, right? That's the reality of this bacterium, right, that causes this disease. Back here. I know you guys are laughing at me right now. It's okay. Here we go. All right. Now, what about the emic? Okay, let's talk about the emic. Leprosy is emic. What does it mean to the people who experience it? Well, leprosy carries an extraordinary stigma. Okay, it carries an extraordinary stigma. It's a mark of if people know that you have leprosy, they're going to shun you, right? It's a mark of shame, really, right? And it's a stigma. It's very negative. People define you negatively, right? And not only you, but also your relatives and friends. So, if I had a person in my family who was a leper, I wouldn't want other people to know that, okay? So you get the idea, right? Everybody's afraid of the lepers, right? It's something to be feared. Everybody's afraid of them. That's why they're locking them up in these leper colonies, okay? And that stigma that goes with leprosy can last a lifetime. They never get over it. Even if that person is cured, they never really get over it, okay? So people are shunned, right? They're shunned by their families. They're shunned by their society. They don't want to be cast out. All right. So that stigma that goes along with leprosy is the emic part. Okay. This is how the culture is defining leprosy, the meaning that it has within that culture symbolically. And look at point number 4 here, right? Point number 4 is that the prejudice against these people, right? The prejudice against the disease and the prejudice against the people that carry the disease can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Self-fulfilling prophecy. So what do we mean if we say that the disease can become a self-fulfilling prophecy? Well, what we mean is that if leprosy is so heavily stigmatized, right? And what did I say about it? It's caused by a bacterium, and that it's highly curable if it's caught early, right? But since people are so stigmatized by it, and they're afraid of being stigmatized by it, and they're afraid of being shunned, and they're afraid of being outcast, and they're afraid of being the objects of prejudice, right, and resentment, that they try to hide it, right? They try to hide it. And so the disease then, takes its course. And then all the negative things that go along with it, the accumulated trauma and the the physical deformities and all that is allowed to happen. So that's what we mean when we say it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay? And then the other thing I wanted to just mention here is that for all my nurses out there, that Ron Barrett is an anthropologist, but he's also a registered nurse. So, yeah, you can do both. Yeah, see, you can do both. All right. So, that is where we're going to leave part 1 for now. Okay? And so we'll be getting back to you pretty soon. All right? Stay safe, stay healthy, and I don't know. See you later. Okay? Bye-bye, y'all.